It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage for our next session, we have Penny Abeywardena, former Commissioner for International Affairs, New York City, and co-chair Cities of Tomorrow and Global Futures Council, and the panelist for this session, which is called Cities for Climate Action. Please welcome Penny and her panelists.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. It is my pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker this morning, Mayor Anne Hidalgo.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you to all the women and the men who came from all around the world to be here today. And thank you very much to the members of the panel. I'm delighted to meet and see them again. It's a pleasure to be here. For me, it is a place that is dear to my heart. It is a place that is dear to my heart because as a woman and a progressist and as many men who support women in their journey, we know that it is important to meet, to work together and to take stock on what we have achieved, what we have conquered and what we can do in the future. I am the mayor of Paris. I've been in this position since 2014. I've been elected and re-elected, which is always more difficult, but still wonderful. This is an outstanding city. It is a world city, the capital of France, a city which faces the problems that any city faces. And I am a person who also is active in the French political life. I have been a feminist since I was 15 myself. I've always advocated for women's rights, and very early on I understood, like you did, that we needed to be united, to come together. I understood that we could not be the best in class if we did not take into account what was happening around us. We all wanted to do our utmost. We wanted to stand out and be noticed. We know that we have to be the best and to work hard, but we also know that this is not enough when we are a woman. So I had a look around and looked at how men behaved, and that's when I understood that we needed to come together, to be united, and to have our own networks to support us, networks to support young women as well. When I was elected for the first time as deputy mayor of the city of Paris in 2001, I soon realized that in politics and in the economy in general, women work a lot and become exhausted, and that turnover was extremely high because women just wanted to stop and do something else because it was too difficult. And I understood that it was important to transfer knowledge and transfer power, which was something that was not happening among women because many of them acquired one experience and then left. My team is very feminine. I have all my deputies here and I want to commend them for their work. I think that we need to be humble and we need to think in the long term. We need to have women alongside us in the long term. As mayor of Paris from 2016 and to 2019, I was the chair of the C40s, so a network of cities committed to fighting climate change, supported by Michael Bloomberg. At the time when I was chair of this forum, I decided to set up the Women for Climate group. The objective was to support young women in companies or in politics or in other sectors by supporting them, by sponsoring them, to make sure that they could make faster progress. And I strongly believe in this transfer of knowledge. And I think that the Women's Forum also plays this very important role when it comes to having an exchange of experiences, of knowledge, of expertise, so that we can grow and that we don't have to ask ourselves the same question over and over again. What did I do wrong? Why did that fail? Because this is a feeling of guilt that we all feel.
Well, today I'd like to tell you several things. Yes, we've won ground. We see this in the economics, in the political world, in the world of associations. And we have many countries, such as ours, where gender equity exists. Women are there. Some become leader of big companies or head big cities, such as in my case, and it's the case for many women throughout the world. But we are fighting very powerful people, and I still see that women's representation is very much deteriorated, notably in the media. I have the experience of a president's election that wasn't successful for me, otherwise you would know about it. But I have this experience, a recent election campaign, where two women in the opposition to me, that is Valérie Pécresse. I was mayor of Paris. She was representing a right-wing Republican movement, and I was representing the Social Democrats, ecologist movement. And I think that we both, with two different projects, went through the same experience. That is of systematic destruction of our words, of discredit thrown at us, experiencing systematically being sent back to our condition as a woman. For some, were unable to speak in front of an audience. To me, I was asked by a journalist, why is it that your husband and your children don't ask you to stop this? Mr. Truchot and Marshall on BFM said, well, your husband and your children are not telling you to stop? And I said, would you ask the same question to a man? And I draw as a conclusion that for this presidential election, it was better to be a right-wing man that was well, it would be someone who would trigger a buzz rather than a left-wing woman who was fighting for French society. So there's still a lot that needs to be achieved, and in the media especially, it's not enough to have women journalists who moderate or present some broadcasts. Some say, don't tell me that if you have problems, it's because you're a woman. It will only get worse. Oh, really? Really? You think there's no link between the fact that I'm a woman and the caricatural approach that the media have, especially for women in power? I'm going to give you another example from the business world. A big leader who was leading an energy company in France was very much in the middle of some controversy, and she had to leave the group for which she was working. And a journalist in economics, who's very well known for the way he writes and his competence, and he wrote, she didn't know how to manage things when she became leader of the company. She asked for the the office of the CEO. And this is something that shouldn't happen. So the problem related to this woman who finally was able to rebuild her life and go on. She's a woman of great value, and she went on working in the world of business. But her situation was summarized and brought down to the fact that she didn't have the codes. She got to power because her men enabled her to get there. And the fact that she wanted to be self-sufficient is not about being disloyal. It's because having responsibilities means that the world is not exactly the same as the one the previous leader handed over to you. But this is not allowed. And of course, they bring in down to their bad girls, these women who accept to be in power and think they can do what they want and invent their own project and convey their own projects. Also keeping in mind that authority is something we have to conquer, that competence is always core to the discussions. Is she strong enough? How many times did I hear this sentence? So a lot of progress was made, but we have hindrances, and that's not only in the political world, it's in the whole world. From the moment a woman gets in power, nevertheless, it is so important to support the youngest ones and those who have responsibilities, because it is also an experience that I'd like to share to you. When a woman gets to leading to a power position in the world of association, in the political world, in economics, she's really trying to change things, because it is so hard to get there that it's not just to look at yourself in the mirror and tell oneself that, oh, look at yourself, you've managed, you achieved this. No, if you've had to bear all this, to struggle, it's because you want it to be useful. So yes, women are the main players in change. They are the ones who convey long-term visions. They are the ones who convey the fact that you might take action that is not popular, such as in Paris saying this city cannot go on being organized around cars, because otherwise we're going to stifle. We have to opt for another solution. That's because women have a long-term perspective, and by definition, they're not expected to reach power. It's disrupting, and they're used to disrupt. And when they start exerting power, they open doors that have never been opened by those who follow codes and customs that are much more traditional and ancient. So it is much more important to support women when they get to power positions. And the level of cities and of collectivities, of villages together is the right level. I think it's a level from which I learned a lot. It's where we can actually change the world. So I want to tell you all this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being involved. I am very much a pacifist, and I think we have the power to change the world. And I want to say this because I can see this throughout the world. There's one topic on which we have to be very cautious, that we have to monitor. That's the media, the models that are promoted through these models. And this is, of course, due to the rise of populism, which targets first and foremost women and women in power, most of all, because these are topics that they don't want to see develop. But we're here. Let's go on, keep going. Thank you for your creativity and thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Penny Abeywardena, New York City's former Commissioner for International Affairs, and that is particularly relevant given that we just heard from Mayor Hidalgo. I had the opportunity to partner with her when she was the chair of C40, and during that period, we in New York City launched a global movement called the Voluntary Local Review, which was a focus, and the purpose of it was to highlight the power and the leadership of cities around the world related to the SDGs, but specifically around innovative city-led climate action. So it is really a pleasure to be here with this distinguished panel. I want to introduce Sylvie, who is the chairwoman and CEO of Dalkia, Hiba Farès, CEO of RATP, I should know better, French apologies, Development, and then Anna König Jerlmyr, who is a former mayor of Stockholm and a member of the World Economic Forum's Net Zero. And I'm going to actually, we don't have that much time, so I want to hit it to you, Anna. I want to build on a little bit of what Mayor Hidalgo was speaking about, and I want to talk about how international cities like Stockholm develop community-based sustainable actions and transform the behaviors to reach the climate neutral objectives. You know, I want examples of what worked, and if you could also talk a little bit about the obstacles, because the obstacles always help us figure out what everybody here can do, right?
Yes, thank you. So what Paris has done and what Mayor Hidalgo also talked about is something that many cities, I think Paris did an amazing job, but you can also see it in Copenhagen, Stockholm, a lot of other cities around the world, to transforming the cities, to see cars as a mobility service amongst others and not as something that you particularly just own and you see the city core as your parking lot. So especially after the pandemic, we can see that more and more people, citizens, enjoy a more livable and green city that is walkable, that has public transport, and that is something that is transforming around the world when it comes to city. It both is good for health, it's less noise pollution, it's less pollution, less asthma attacks. We have the data that can prove it. But it's also good for resilience when it comes to climate. So what happened in Copenhagen, for example, 2011, they had flooding, and more cities risk that kind of climate change. So it's also good to be resilient against heat waves, as Athens is doing, but also transforming their city, but also cities like Stockholm, Copenhagen, and others, because green areas, parks, is much more resilient to flooding, and a built environment is much more vulnerable when it comes to heat waves. So that is also good to plant trees, to have green areas, and actually people loves it. And the obstacle is that you will have huge criticism before doing that. And I know that every politician faces that. So what will happen if you transform, as in Barcelona with the superblocks? The shop owner probably will come and say you will destroy the city core, the shops and our business. The car owner that commute to the city will be very upset. And what is this? You're destroying the city, we can't live here. So you have to be persistent. You have to know that in the end, people will love it. People will see the values that we are introducing with this, with a better health, better life quality. But you have to take that kind of criticism. One example is we introduced summer streets, for example. So the restaurants and cafes could take the streets in the summertime in our city, since many people also leave. And in the beginning, the shop owners and the citizens were very upset because where should I park my car? Or this is bad for business. But in the end, actually, people loved it. So when we said sometimes that, okay, there will be no summer street in this area next year, they were demonstrating. They were like, we want our summer street back, because suddenly they could enjoy the public spaces to see them as living room. And we also have fantastic results when it comes to children's streets, where we actually involve children and for the city development that could have activities on the streets, summertime. Just 2 examples, but this is something that is going on internationally. But it is obstacles, and some politicians is not re-elected. So it's a huge risk, but you have to be determined this is the right way. And I think it's also important to talk about the values it will bring. Another, I don't know how much time, but another obstacle is to work with procurements. So our city, for example, a lot of cities, we serve food for our elderly, we serve food for the school children every day. And of course, we have with C40, as mentioned by Mayor Hidalgo, we have a food policy that brings the WWF standards, for example, but also fish from safe water and so on. And we also limited meat serving, but that was very controversial. So I would say cars and meat are perhaps the most controversial topics as a politician. So when I was in Copenhagen introducing our new food policy and a declaration from C40, suddenly I got some messages back from Sweden that I was hugely criticized with all the media, all the parties, because she's taking away the children's meat and no more meat for the elderly. So that was a lesson learned, that you really need to work with the communication and bring out the values. It's like, it's better health, it's better for the planet, but you have to engage in communication before doing that, because it is controversial and you need brave leadership.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, the politicians understand they will not be re-elected. I have much more examples, but I will end there.
Thank you. Well, you need brave leadership. Absolutely. You need brave leadership, but you also need strategic partnerships. And so, Sylvie, I'd love to talk to you about how companies work with local public authorities to have a more positive impact, specific to your expertise around decarbonization of energy and transport, and of course, customer and employee engagement.
So, hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, of course, in Women's Forum. What I would say is Dalkia works a lot with cities. We have 2 specialties, just to be very quick. We are a specialist in developing district networks, heat district networks, but also cooling systems. And the other part of our business is how to save energy, how to accompany our customers to avoid wasting energy. So, and what I see every day is that cities want to fight against climate change. And I would like to focus, maybe to give an example, and we don't have a lot of time, just to give an example about heat. Because when you look at the level of consumption of the production of heat in the northern countries, for example, in France, it's a big part of the consumption. When you look at the consumption of energy in the country, in France, when you look at heat that means heating, but also water, and also industrial heats. And we look at that, it is around 50% of the energy consumption. So it's huge. It's very, very important to be focused on how to produce heat without CO2 emissions. And how could we do that with cities? But we do that through developing heat district networks. And to produce heat district networks without CO2 emissions, we develop biomass with wood, we develop geothermy, we develop also how to recover energy. So, for example, when you have a waste plants, there are huge energy that goes in the air because you burn the waste, and you can recover this energy. You can do that also with data centers, because when you put your hand behind a computer, it is hot. And you can also, I think there is a project with RATP to recover energy from the train. And you can also recover from industrial. So very, very interesting just to think about such local energy you can use to produce heat and to produce heat for people. And for example, next week we go to Issoire. Issoire is a very small town in the south of France, in the south, just in the south of Clermont-Ferrand. And we are going to celebrate a district network, and we have both energy to do that. It is nearly 90% of energy without CO2 emissions, with both biomass and also energy from Constellium. Constellium is a big industrial, and they melt aluminium, and so they produce huge heat, and we recover the heat to put in the district networks to, to provide heat to the inhabitants of the town. So it is really important. And maybe the second thing I would say is for cities, it is also very, very important just to save energy. Because you can find lots of things, and thanks to digital, you can help how to save energy. And we have lots of examples. For example, in the UK with the hospitals, we have commitments with some hospitals in London, just to help them to reduce the CO2 emissions. I have one in mind. It is 15% of CO2 emissions less. Just to help them to fight against climate change.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing. Hiba, I want to actually broaden it now to the international level. And if you can talk about how private actors and public authorities can work together to foster more sustainable transformation of cities and leverage the work that you've already been doing, and RATP is perfectly positioned to be doing this work.
Okay, thank you. So just a quick mention to Anna here. We don't have discussions about meat in France, but about barbecue. So it's very linked, and it's always very controversial. So we have a lot of things in common. So some of you here, I see a lot of known faces. Some of you here know RATP because we are the operator of the public transport in Paris. But I don't think a lot of you are aware that we operate and maintain metro, bus, trains, ferries, autonomous pods, whatever you name it, in 14 different countries, in 4 continents, serving 800 cities, so working with a lot of public authorities, going from Washington, D.C. to South Africa, to Hong Kong. We are really implemented all over the globe. So I'm the one in charge of this business outside Paris, but I would be happy to interact with you on our Paris business too. So I love public transport because it's a sector that have environmental, social, and societal virtues. We don't really think about it when we take it in the morning, when we take a metro or a bus, but it is really a big way to change our gas emissions. For example, when you take a metro, instead of taking your car, you will have 60 times less carbon emissions per traveler per kilometer. So it's a huge difference. It's make a huge difference for the planet. And then if you, for the one of you who are familiar with the network in Paris, we have the biggest urban rail train, which is called RERA. It's a big train, and it is the equivalent of 17 highway lanes. So you imagine 17 lanes of a highway, and just this train is making the difference and making much less cars in the streets of Paris, and that's the case in other cities we operate. So usually public transport is supposed to be less expensive, more efficient, more reliable, more whatever you name it, quicker, etc., for any passenger to be able to move freely. So our question, and what we are working really closely with the public transport authorities, is why people don't leave their car more easily when it's possible. And I have 2 main explanations. One of them is that public transport networks are not really, if you look on a worldwide level, not greatly developed everywhere. So you have even big cities that have poor public transport networks. So it is, we really need to continue investing and improving the public transport systems and networks. And in a lot of regions in the world, whether it is in Australia, in Canada, etc., in Singapore, in Paris, a huge investment is being done in order to add new trains, new metro lines, etc., new buses, in order to improve. Because if the system is not well designed, is not efficient enough, etc., people won't leave their car. And if you look at smaller cities or other spread out areas, you won't have any other offer besides your own car. So it's very difficult to say, leave your car. So this is why investing, building a network, creating an alternative is the first move in order to consider a model shift or change in how people would move. The other challenge is about, okay, in some cities we have good networks running, fully running, etc., but still people are still attached to their cars. Why is that? And I think this is one of our major challenges, is to offer a travel experience as I don't know, easy, if it's a car is easy, but as easy, as seamless, as good as a car experience. Otherwise, people would find themselves attached to the comfort of their car, though it is more expensive, though it is polluting, though it is a hassle in many cities. So it's our job to daily improve the customer experience. Otherwise, people won't make this model shift. So there's work on supply and on demand. And if we look at the two aspects, we could understand all what is happening currently about the issues of financing all this. You have to invest heavily in networks. You have to invest heavily in improving the customer experience. So, and where does the money come from? Especially when you are in the middle of a conflict, of an economic crisis, of climate change, etc., and a lot of big projects are led at the same time. So this is the main difficulty of the sector currently. And when I talk about public transport, it includes active mobility, bike sharing, whatever, you name it, it's the same topic. So where does the money come from? Public money is becoming very rare. And how do we reinvent the business model in order to re-challenge the thinking? So this needs, in my opinion, a bold vision of the cities. You mentioned it, Anna, and Madame Hidalgo mentioned it too. We need bold visions of each city and urban planning and understandable 10 years, 15 years frameworks in order to know how to invest where we are heading to. But we need really to work with a broader ecosystem, with a lot of other stakeholders. For example, you have users and the taxpayers who are already paying for public transport, but you also have employers usually benefiting from public transport networks. So organization, companies could help. They are helping in France, but in other countries they aren't. And then all the people who will benefit from a better public transport. For example, if you look in Paris, every time you extend the metro line, you have in the cities near Paris, the price of real estate is jumping hugely, and nobody is paying anything on this land value creation. So how could we make it a different system of financing all these great schemes that we have all over the world for public transport? It's our biggest challenge.
Thank you so much. Well, we are going to unfortunately have to wrap it up quickly. And we have talked about what private authorities and what private sector and public authorities have been doing, but now what can the audience do? And can I ask all of you, and Anna, let's start with you. What's a key action or recommendation the audience can do within their organization to move this conversation forward?
I think also that was mentioning from a lot of panels yesterday as a recommendation, and I have the same. It's to use the data, because we talk about action today, and it's really important. I think that, I mean, the problem sometimes with the COP meetings, the last one, for example, is that a lot of negotiations, but less action in the end. So action is crucial, but you have to figure out how to make the most effect of your actions. And if it's not giving the most effect, you have also to change actions. So I think that data is the single most important catalyst for green transition. So you can work with multi-sensors, or you can just ask for data within your own organization. And yesterday was mentioning a company that used CO2 budgets. We are also having that in my city. A lot of cities work with that, but as a company, you can also do that to have quarterly kind of CO2 emission you follow up. So please, just whatever you do, ask yourself, what is the data? What is the effect? That's my
That's fantastic.
most important.
We're slightly over time, but I'm
Sorry.
going to ask both of you just quick key actions, please. Sylvie, please.
Yes, you know, the title of this event is Time to Act. And to act, we will need lots of people just to succeed in implementing our projects, just to succeed in energy transition. So I would like to say around you that the energy transition jobs are so exciting.
Yes. We need you in the movement, working and being leaders in it. And finally, Hiba?
And what can I say? I hope you are all convinced that active mobility, public transport are good, and please do encourage them, because I know that organizations has a lot to do, a lot of choices to do in order to encourage this model shift. So I'm counting on you.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Thank you to this excellent panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Penny. Thank you so much, ladies, for that very insightful discussion. Thank you for being with us today.